Okay, great. We had some people who couldn't make it, so the recording is going to go on our YouTube after this, and then I'll send the link to everyone who registered through the link that we sent out earlier. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And there's a lot of familiar faces here, so it's great to see you all. And I'm happy there a lot of people are still engaged after the long legislative session we had that ended on June 4th. I'm going to introduce myself, and then I also have a co-presenter, Samantha Danowski, who is the state director of the Sierra Club Connecticut, who's going to be presenting alongside with me. But my name is Juliana LaRue. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an organizer with the Sierra Club Connecticut. And welcome to the end of session webinar. All right, we're going to go over today's agenda, and I just want to say that there's going to be a lot of discussion at the end of the presentation. So please hold all your questions or put them in the chat until we get to the discussion portion. We're going to try to be as quick and diligent as possible through all of the information, and then I want to hear from you, and that's the point of this, is to hear what everyone has to say about the session and any questions that you may have. So today's agenda, this is what it's going to look like. We're going to talk about what happened this session and the political nature that presented itself this year and what that looked like kind of from an advocate's perspective. And there's a lot of advocates here, so if you have any perspective on that at the end, please add that in. We're going to talk about people power and our mobilization in the session and how we cultivated action before, during, and now after the session. And then we're going to cover a few key legislative wins and losses, and we're going to put in the chat, and there's also a QR code um, where you can scan and look at our full recap, which goes into detail about all of the bills that we covered and tracked this session. And then, like I said, at the end, we're going to go into Q&A and a discussion with all of you. All right, so here's the mobilization and gearing up for the legislative session. At Sierra Club Connecticut, we have a very great legislative committee who a lot of people are on this call today. So thank you everyone who's on our legislative committee and helped us put on events and take action. So um, our legislative work is all year long. It doesn't just happen right before and during the session. We try to cultivate as much momentum going into the session as possible before by building relationships with legislators, getting involved in communities, educating people on environmental issues as well. So before session, we held climate and clean energy events. So these were in-district meetings with legislators where we talked about the state of climate change and clean energy in the state to kind of give a broad understanding of where we are and why we need action. CTLCV also holds their annual environmental summit, so we tabled there with all of our key legislative priorities. This happened right before the session. We also held a first day of session gathering, which you can see in the top right corner here, where we had people come and just gather to get involved in the session. We had our key priorities that we were trying to hand out to legislators, and it was just a good meeting day just to network and start the session off strong. And then before the session as well, we held one-on-one meetings with legislators on our key priorities, trying to get them to introduce key legislation and give them an understanding of where we're at going into the session. And I'm going to hand it off to Sam to talk about the political energy of this legislative session. So, Sam, if you're here, I'm going to hand it off to you.
I am. Thank you, Juliana. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Danowski. She, her. I'm the state director of Sierra Club's Connecticut chapter. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. Before we get into like the details of what happened this session, I thought it was important to talk about the context that we found ourselves in and how it played out. Ideally, we're in a context where we can be proactively pushing forward to be making progress. And we certainly did do that. But going into this session, we were very aware that we were going to have to defend a lot of important priorities. There was a lot of, the reason for that was, partially the national politics, partially the state politics flowing out of that, and also the major focus on energy costs in Connecticut. And so, last summer, folks, there was a rate increase and a hot summer, and bills went up, and we know they went up because it was a very hot summer, because we were paying off a Millstone bailout that happened several years ago, and because there were COVID arrearages to pay off. And the focus on energy bills didn't focus on any of those things. It focused on attacking clean energy. So we were very much on the defensive, trying to make sure we kept energy efficiency and renewable energy in the programs that we have. There were a number of false narratives that weren't exactly based on facts, but we found the opposition. We're definitely giving out information that was not necessarily true in order to get forward what they wanted to get. And we are scrupulously truthful and use information and facts and science in our work. And it's hard to fight lies that come out like that, and folks that don't feel as it's as important to stick to the truth. And then, we know utility companies and fossil fuel companies are very powerful and well-funded in the legislature. So we're on the defense on all of those things. And Juliana is going to talk in a minute about the pressure we put on. But in order to fight against that kind of well-funded power, we really need people. And so we put on the people pressure that we have available to us, and she'll talk about that in a minute. We're also working with a legislature that particularly the House leadership, that really wants to be bipartisan, so wants to have an agreement with the Republicans in order to move forward, despite the fact that they have practically a supermajority in the House, and in the Senate there's a very large distance between the numbers of Democrats and the number of Republicans. But our leadership seeks bipartisanship, which leads to compromise. Part of the reason they do that is because of the time frame of the legislature. They are time bound, and they allow unlimited debate. So a filibuster basically could happen that could take all the time out. And so they're trying to, negotiate some the timing of these debates and using compromise to do that. And then the other reason they compromise is that there is an opposite, we have our agenda and the things we want to see move forward, and there is opposition to that agenda. And, like I said, the well-funded opposition is there, trying to push back. And so lawmakers are not just compromising between the parties, they're compromising between the stakeholders that are at the Capitol. I just wanted to share a little bit about what compromises we did see show up in the final product. And one was these timed debates. They literally negotiate how much time they'll spend debating on a bill. And we did see, there'll be a 4-hour debate. There'll be a 4-hour debate on the bill. And so we saw that happen throughout the session. We also see in the legislation that passed studies instead of direct policy change. Studies is an incremental step forward, but it's not the complete policy change that we're often looking for. And that, that's a compromise that shows up, is you'll see a study instead of a direct policy change. I also see kind of incremental steps towards policies. Instead of a whole ban on something, we'll get a partial. And that's how that kind of compromise shows up. And then we saw some policy trades where, we'll do your bill if you let us do ours and don't debate it indefinitely. So that's a little bit of the context, and we'll talk a little bit more about the details. I'll pass it back to you, Juliana.
Okay, great. And I'm just gonna add all of the things that Sam said. Obviously, we're very present in this session, but what comes next is our key mobilizations of the session and how we kept up that pressure. If we did not keep up pressure, legislators would not take climate or the environment as seriously. So I just want to thank everybody before I go into this. If anyone showed any type of activism this session by participating in an action alert or coming to the Capitol to provide testimony or coming to a lobby day or one of our events. Thank you. You truly made a difference. So I just want to thank everyone here who's done that. So yeah, as you can see here, we did a lot this session to try to gear up specifically climate action. As you know, before this session, it was about a 2 3 year hiatus of anything happening on climate change at the legislature. And so a lot of people were fed up, and we kind of had to re-strategize on how we need to build that pressure. And so we started early, and I think it paid off. So Sierra Club, like I mentioned before, we hold weekly legislative committee meetings during the legislative session, who it's led by Steve Lewis, who is also on this call. And during these weekly legislative committee meetings, we go in extreme detail on what's going on at the legislature, going in detail on every bill that we're tracking and providing up to date updates that are going on, and providing committee members with actions that they can take as well. So that's a way that a lot of people have gotten involved in this session. And if you would like to get involved in the committee meetings, please let us know. We also participated in most to every single Environment Committee public hearing. So we provided testimony on uh, many bills that, when I share our recap, most of all those bills we provided testimony on. We sent out action alerts throughout the session. We held lobby days and press conferences like the Climate Lobby Day, the Reduced Toxins in Wildlife Lobby Day, the Waste Lobby Day. We held events like the Honk for Climate Action, and then we held multiple conferences, like I said, but we held um, two press conferences on energy efficiency, which really helped shape one key bill that we were tracking this session.
And I'll
And
just, if I can just add in there, we co-hosted those, so I want to
yeah,
acknowledge our other partners.
most of all of these events we worked with partners, like Third Act, the Zero Waste Coalition, the Climate Coalition, CTLCV, CCAG, BLM 860, NAG. So there are so many partners that are involved on this work, and we definitely could not do these things alone. And I just want to say that the Sierra Club team, volunteers, and advocates that are in the environmental space really showed up at a regular presence at the Capitol. So that really made a difference on how we were mobilizing throughout the session. And so, like I said, next we're gonna go into a few key bills that we're tracking, but Sam's gonna put in the chat the link to our full legislative session wrap up, or you can scan the QR code on the screen, which goes into detail on every single bill that we track this session. All right, I'm gonna go to the next slide. And I'm going to hand it back off to Sam to cover two bills, and then I'll cover a few bills, and then we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good. House Bill 5004 was the main bill for climate mitigation this session. Same number as last year's bill. I think most folks here probably worked on it, heard about it, know about it. So I'm not going to go in great detail, but it ended up being different than the bill that was passed out of the House last year from the get-go, and it was negotiated throughout the session. So where do we end up? And I'm just going to highlight three of the things that we think are key in this bill for it to the advances that it makes for us as a state. One is that it updates the state's emission reduction targets. And so that's our Global Warming Solution Act. What it does is it adds a 2040 target. Right now, we only have a 2030 and a 2050 target. And it also updates the 2050 target from a greenhouse gas emission reduction of 80% by 2050 to we must not only have that 80% greenhouse gas reduction, we also have to have net zero. So it allows nature-based solutions also to play a part in how we meet our climate goals. The second big bucket area I want to highlight are the studies that were put in place for renewable energy and access to renewable energy, which in and of themselves don't mean necessarily immediate action, but they come back to the legislature and I think tease us up for further action on these areas. And they revolve around heat pumps, around solar canopies, about how renters are able to access renewable energy. And there's kind of like a triple what the legislature and DEEP are calling a triple benefit. So they're looking to find out how can we do this to reduce bills and at the same time make electricity more reliable and reduce greenhouse gases. So where are we going to get the most bang for our buck to do all three of those things? And a little bonus there, there was last year associated with 5004, $25 million for heat pumps in the bonding package, and it's there again in 2025. So there is some funding in order to do some work on heat pumps. And then finally, the other big area in this bill, and these are by no means the entirety of the bill, but three areas that we are focusing on is the requirements for the state to lead by example. So state agencies will have to get 100% of their electricity supply from renewable and zero carbon sources ahead of the state goal. And heating and emission reduction goals for state buildings are included in this bill. So to pressure the state to lead by example.
Okay, I will cover this one and Sam will cover the next one. So Senate Bill 9 was the other kind of Senate climate priority bill. And the HB 5004 is about reducing emissions and lowering our greenhouse gas emissions, which ultimately lead to climate change. Senate Bill 9 recognizes the fact that climate change is already here, so how do we deal with it? So it focuses on the response and adaptation of climate change. And so it's focusing on climate resilience, and it's aimed at protecting Connecticut communities from climate-related risks like flooding, heat, and sea level rise. It enhances state and local planning. It expands flood and climate disclosure requirements for renters and homeowners. It also regulates pesticides and rodenticides as well. The bill integrates climate data into zoning, housing, emergency preparedness, and water systems to try to build a more adaptive future across the state. I think that this bill was a big result of the major flooding and brush fires that happened last year, last August and last fall in the state of Connecticut. And so people are now seeing that climate change is impacting us now, and I think that this bill really addresses that and gives municipalities funding and the resources needed to make sure that they are adapting to climate-related disasters as well. And like I said, they added in the neonics and rodenticides. Those are toxins that affect wildlife. The neonics banned the use of these pesticides on turf grass by 2027. We I the that part of the bill was a little bit watered down. And we're hoping to come back next session to include more things, but it is a really great step in the right direction because the use of neonics on turf grass is the greatest use of that pesticide, as well as a step on only allowing professionals to use rodenticides as well. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and Sam's going to cover SB4, the energy bill.
Oh, the energy bill. Over the last few years, the major energy bill, bless you, Patricia, um, tends to be kind of a giant omnibus bill that includes a lot of things, oftentimes things we don't like. And this year, it was basically being negotiated right up till the end, but throughout the session, we saw real pressure, like I said earlier, on energy efficiency and renewable programs. There were other bills that would have destabilized those. And that got hearings, that had testimony and support testimony against. And I think, as advocates and in coalition with so many partners, what I really want to appreciate is how we all push back against that. And I think in the energy bill that came out, that was a huge defensive win to make sure that those were not those programs were not completely gutted. And I want to, Andy, I see you on here. Thank you for your work in leading press conferences and the charge in the energy efficiency area. And Leticia Colon is not here, but a major force, those who know her and who really defended it as well, and all of our partners. And so in this bill, we do see there's some good, there's some defensive wins, and there's some not so great stuff. So on the good side, there is advances in thermal energy networks. It creates a grant program. It's not funded yet, but it starts to move us towards thermal energy networks. It allows and encourages grid enhancing technologies, which will get more electrons through the same transmission system that we have, so we don't have to spend more on that, and we can be more efficient in transmission. And the creation of a demand response, active demand response for the electric utilities, which right now DEEP can procure passive demand response, but active demand response will help lower demand, and also for the first time creates a demand response program, both active and passive, the gas companies. And it removes certain biomass and all landfill gas from being Class 1 renewable energy. So those are good steps forward. Like I said, the defense, particularly of our conservation load management program, and some of the worst proposals to change solar credits were averted. And thank you all for being part of making sure that those bad proposals didn't happen. The parts we're concerned about in the bill is that it does weaken our state's renewable portfolio standard. When they took out biomass, they also decided to adjust the RPS, as it's called, downward, knowing they wouldn't be acquiring the biomass and landfill gas. But it's significantly lowered, and something we're going to have to come back to. It also, there's a real fervor for what I call baby nukes, small modular reactors, things that don't exist and are very costly, and the timeline is pretty long right now. But legislators seem to think it's a great idea rather than focusing on renewables, which are ready to go. But the bill would allow these baby nukes to be in any community that agrees to have them. So a lot to unpack in this bill, but those are some of the key measures.
Great. And now we're gonna go into some bills that we were tracking that did not pass. This year, we really cultivated a lot of momentum on managing solid waste in the state, and I just want to give a shout out to the Connecticut Zero Waste Coalition and CCEJ for all of their work on zero waste. So there were two bills on waste this session, HB 6917, which I'm going to um, talk about, and then HB 6229, which ended up kind of merging together into one bill at the end. So HB 6917 passed out of the House on the last day of the session and did not have time to get passed out of the Senate. So hopefully next year we come back with a stronger, more comprehensive waste bill and we get that through. I think that's a really big priority for the state as we're shipping out the majority of our waste and big diesel polluting trucks to environmental justice communities to the east, no, to the west of us. So HB 6917 obviously focused on the management of solid waste in the state. At the end of the session, like I said, they added in the 6229, which was focusing on polystyrene. This bill would have established a task force to study the reduction of single-use plastic, including polystyrene in the state. It also would have established a food donation program, which is great because it allows organizations like Food Rescue US to get involved in large scale generators of food waste to teach them how to and work with these generators on how to donate their food waste. As I don't know if you all know, but food waste is the biggest contributor to our waste stream. Also the heaviest. And so really focusing on how we can divert food waste in the most sustainable, environmentally friendly way is something that we really need to look forward to in the state, and food donation is part of that. Um, like I said, this bill did not make it through this session, but we're hoping that with the support and the co-sponsorships we had on the two bills we were focusing on, we can get something more comprehensive done next session. And I'm gonna cover this one. It's a housing bill, as some of you may know. Housing and climate justice are extremely interlinked. HB 6889 would expand just cause eviction. There is a just cause eviction in this state where it protects people who are disabled and elderly people from eviction. So this bill would have expanded to everybody to be um, covered under the just cause eviction law. Um, so HB 6889 aimed to expand eviction protections for tenants from being evicted and rate increase protections to tenants residing for at least 13 months in certain housing types. Like I said, just cause eviction protections are essential to our fight for environmental justice. Without stable housing, communities, especially low-income residents and communities of color, are most vulnerable to climate impacts like extreme heat, flooding, and pollution exposure as well. Tenants are also burdened with higher utility bills from inefficient homes and dangerous conditions that do not meet basic needs, let alone climate resilience. Um, and if tenants want to assert their right to a habitable home, maybe by asking for solar panels or their home to be more energy efficient, they may face being evicted. Or if their tenants want to add more energy efficiency measures to their home or their apartment or housing type, they would exponentially raise rent, which would push people out of their home and displace them as well. So this is why we focus on housing and just cause eviction. And I just want to give a shout out to Representative Antonio Felipe, who's pictured on this slide, who really fought and worked with um, organizations like the Connecticut Tenants Union on this bill. He really is a great advocate for housing, and he stood on that House floor for hours um, debating another housing bill. But this bill did not make it through this session. Like Sam talked about earlier, things are negotiated behind closed doors, and unfortunately, this bill would have taken up too much debate time and did not have enough votes in the House for it to get called to the floor. And there was a ton of support. People were lobbying on this every single day. So we're hoping to work with Representative Felipe and others next session to get something done on housing protections. All right. Sam and I did a lot of talking. So now we have about 30 minutes to have a discussion with you all. I just want to note some more housekeeping. If you would like to talk, make sure you're muted now. Just please raise your hand using the hand raise function, and then Sam and I will call on you to unmute if you would like to talk. And we have a few questions here, but I would love some reactions to everything that Sam and I had talked about so far, if anyone has any initial comments. And I also want to note, try to keep your comments a little bit limited so we can try to get to as many as possible. I can't see if people have their hand raised. I don't know if you can either, Sam. And you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
I figured I'd take advantage of it, of your ask. So I want to go back to the very first point you made, that you're doing this year round, not just right before the legislative session and during it. And one of the things that I didn't hear you talk about is how we go on the offensive. How do we build an offensive narrative, so that we're not always on the defense when we get to the legislature. So I wanted to just ask what you do, or, what you think we should all be doing.
I'll take this first and then Sam can take it. We kind of talked about how we're building mobilization before the session. I take that as being on the offensive because we're getting ahead of the game on making sure that legislators know what our priorities are and trying to gather certain co-sponsors and getting legislators to introduce certain bills. Um, and so being on the offensive, I think for us means to get ahead of the game and get our priorities aligned with other groups and making sure that we're putting pressure before the session starts and gathering community members and educating them on topics. I don't know, Sam, do you have anything else to add on that? If not, we can go to the next
I would
hand.
just quickly say what we noticed the opposition doing so well is that it's not just advocates and groups on the opposition side, it's their they have legislators championing it and carrying it around, carrying the water for them. And so just cultivating champions, co-hosting meeting with lawmakers on key topics, having in-district meetings, having a good in-district game, I think is a important way to be on the offensive.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
Zanita, I think you have your hand up if you can unmute.
Hi, my name is Zenaida Gonzalez. I am a PT partner resident leader. I'm very new to like the law, policies, and politics and stuff, but in the last legislative session, I have been to Hartford. I have seen the outcome. I have seen the numbers add up to, more than 50% to either pass or stop a bill. And it's like the people on the seat is 30% and they can overtake the vote based on their 30%. It doesn't make sense to me because growing up, the more votes is is the winner, not the people who doesn't live under these laws. Basically, they don't have to pay their fair share into what we're working on, and we still get shut out. And they'll smile in our faces, they'll pretend to understand, they'll pretend to have empathy for people who living in these conditions, and then turn around and sit up with their buddy and like, well, we're homeowners, so we're gonna hike the rent up on my building. That, yeah, we're gonna just cause everything, but we're not gonna take no subsidized housing. Oh yeah, we're gonna knock down people's homes, force them out in the street to put conglomerate homes when we haven't fixed nothing in our sewer systems. We have people living in filth right now. Like, I've been saying this on meetings plenty of times. For Bridgeport to have a death by cold with so many homeless shelters, so many organizations out there fighting to save homelessness and not being able to house people, that they die in the cold, and you sit in the legislative and you just ignore us. no matter how many years we go back and how many years we fight and how many more groups we come up with, if they're not on our side, we're never going to overtake them. How do you make sense of politics when the politicians are not making sense?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I definitely hear you, and I heard you bring up housing, and housing is a really big issue, especially for the state. There was a bill that was passed, I believe HB 5002. I'll look it up and put it in the chat, which addresses some of your concerns. And I agree, sometimes we have the votes for bills to pass. Sometimes the opposition, or people in the minority have a lot of power to debate bills. Like I said, for the just cause eviction bill, they they would have debated that bill for way too long, so they decided to not bring it to the floor, which is extremely disappointing. And I would just say to keep putting pressure on legislators, tell them your story, um, and let them know that, you need to see a change because ultimately you're voting for them, right? You have the power to either vote for them or not vote for them, when the time comes. And so keeping that pressure on them and letting them know what you want is very important. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna-
I also just want to
I-
say thank you. PT Partners is such a powerful and impactful and, doing really amazing and necessary work. So thank you for your leadership on that. And I think we totally share your frustration about this, about how to hold lawmakers accountable. I don't know that we have the answers, but yeah, always thinking about it. And as a group, I hope we can crack that open.
And we'll definitely keep that in mind for next session as well, and would love to work with you. I'm going to hand it over to Ian and then Dana.
Hi, thanks, Joanna. I
Ian, you're breaking up. You might want to shut off your camera and see if that's better.
Or put your
Is that
question.
better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, I think, one thing is in local communities, so much of the attention is always on municipal budgets, on school budgets, and the group of kind of climate people is sort of, unfortunately, seems to be always a little limited. So whenever we can, to whatever extent next year we can really provide a credible and kind of obvious, way to help municipalities and school budgets, whether it's, through various green things, I think that's super powerful. Likewise, I know a lot of unions, half of their work, some of the building trades unions, is at schools. And I know they're problematic sometimes. They're probably going to be pushing for this Plainfield facility. But that's another opportunity. So I think really thinking about, when we look at what kind of bills we're going for, and I think I'm sure you guys think about this, but just really thinking about what is that functional coalition building where it's really solid and because I think we could build and that could help us. I know it's still difficult, but thanks.
And if you want to put information on how people can get involved on the Plainfield incinerator, that would be great for people to learn more, maybe. Awesome. Thank you. I don't see anyone else.
You had Dana and then
Yeah.
Kim.
Oh, yes, sorry. Go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, I just lowered my hand because I was getting two things. One is a comment and one's a question. And my comment is just that, I read not too long ago that something like 75% of the legislators are landlords. So there's already, even if it's not cognizant, even if it's an unconscious bias, I think, against pro-tenant laws or bills. So I thought that was really important, that a huge proportion of the legislators are landlords, and that's not how it is across Connecticut in terms of people's employment. So just something that maybe we just always have to deal with. But then the other thing is a question about some of these bills that had such pushback from legislators. We talk about having relationships with them, and I wonder about how much effort is or how beneficial, if effort is made, to try and have one-on-ones with legislators that are really opposed, such as, Stephen Harding comes to mind, Kendall Laura, Dubinsky. I mean, do you guys try and, or should we try and have one-on-ones with them and talk to them and, in a very diplomatic way to help bend them a little bit?
I would say yes if you are up for a good debate. Some legislators that you mentioned are extreme climate deniers, and I do think that trying to talk to them may be helpful, may not, but I think at the end of the day, you should always make your voice heard, regardless of how they feel about climate, environmental, or environmental justice legislation. So, in the end, I would say, yeah, having conversations with opposition is really important, especially if you're their constituent. They're there to represent you. And if you care about something, they should hopefully care about that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm just amazed somebody's a climate denier in Connecticut that's a legislator. So thanks.
Yeah. Sam, any comments? If not, I'll go to, I think Kim had her hand up. Okay, go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I still need to figure out how to raise my hand in Zoom electronically. So I just wanted to update people who were following the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment and want to know what happened. This amendment to put this resolution to put environmental rights into the state constitution passed the Government Administration and Elections Committee, but they had watered down the language so much we could not support it. It would be very weak language that you really don't want to have in the Constitution. So we're going to work on trying to negotiate with the various people involved in order to get stronger language. And so that's something we need to be doing before the next session to try and get all that worked out. And I just also wanted to say that we, the group working on this, are very interested in talking to people across the state about how the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment might apply to specific fights that you are involved in. So, I have talked with the PT partners, for example. If there are people, particularly environmental justice groups or groups that have a particular issue in your town or your region that you think might be relevant to the Environmental Rights Amendment, I'm trying to make those connections. I will put my contact information in the chat.
Thanks, Kim. And I also put what we had in our end of session recap on the Environmental Rights Amendment, which was one of our priority bills this session. I'm going to hand it over to Hendry, Andy, and then Peter.
I apologize. I have somebody working at the house, so I had to step away for a second. I just have a real quick question on HB 5004. I know it's passed both the House and the Senate. Has the governor signed it yet?
Not yet. I think it has a public act number, but I don't think it's signed it yet.
Yeah, he doesn't have to sign it. So under Connecticut law, if he can sign or he can veto or he can do nothing. And so it becomes automatically law in, I believe it's 10 days after the bill is passed, 10 business days, if he doesn't do anything with it.
Okay. So we're definitely expecting him not to veto.
I haven't heard anything about it. 5004, right?
Yeah.
Haven't heard
It,
anything
it has a
like that.
public act number. I saw it when I looked at it earlier today, so it has a public act number.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything about it being vetoed. I don't think it will be.
Okay. Awesome. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. Go ahead, Andy, and then Peter.
Thanks, Juliana. Yeah, I just wanted to second comments about reaching out to legislators, especially your own, but also Steinberg and Needleman, and Juliana and Sam. You might have further comment on this, but the rumor that I have heard from a couple of sources is that they really tried to safeguard public benefit programs, push against bonding for energy efficiency, and SB4 was it was according to one person there could be like several dozen, like up to 80 people who were working on the bill. I don't understand how you can do that, work that much of a bill, without public hearings, but that's the way it is. But if you're in those Representative Steinberg or Needleman's districts, a call to them would always be a help. And I'm also a firm believer in reaching out to the opponents, because if you can anyway blunt a climate denier's enthusiasm for blocking a good bill, that's money well spent. I wouldn't go in with high hopes. I would try to go in with just a couple of facts and just be reasonable and try to hold on to your temper. But if you can do that, that would be a job well done. And thanks again to Sierra Club for Sam, your support personally to me throughout the session with some crazy press conferences was invaluable. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I don't know if Sam, do you have anything to add, or you want to go to the next person?
No, thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. Got a chance to see Andy quite a bit, and help as best I could on as press conferences were unfolding. So thanks for that.
I believe, Peter, you have your hand up, and then George, you can go ahead next. I think we have about 10 more minutes, and I have one more thing to get to. So these may be the last two questions.
Well, this is Peter Festa. Yes, before we run out of time, I just I wrote my question. It's at the top of the chat, and my group follows the Energy and Technology Committee and energy-related issues most closely. And there were a lot of things that good results from this legislative session, and a lot of things that were pushed back on that were bad, but I'm not getting a lot of information on a few things that came out of these bills that are energy related. One of them, the first one that I'm concerned about is what happened to the residential net metering program, and what is going on with this 3.5 cent non-bypassable charge that has to be paid now, and that's a minimum, is the way it's written. And I'm also, I haven't heard a lot about the EV charging program, and it seems to me that the little I can read about it is that the eligibility has changed drastically on that. So I was wondering if you could help elucidate a little bit on those.
Yeah, I can take that one, Peter. Those are all in SB4, the omnibus energy bill. And we're, areas that that got some cuts and got some rollbacks from where we were, based on this, pretty fierce effort to reduce items in the public benefit charge. And so that's what happened with the EV program. With the solar, you know, it falls there as well. So everyone pays the public benefit charge, but right now, the way solar works is that if you have a solar credit, it pays for everything that could possibly be on your bill. And so, you know, the debate, and I guess negotiations that happened resulted in changing that program with an eye towards allowing the solar credits to go just for supply, and make sure that everyone was paying for whatever public benefit charge comes across. So that's where that landed. That was, you know, part of this debate, and part of the concessions that lawmakers made to the pushback on the public benefit charge. Same with the EV program. There was pretty strong pushback on it. You know, I think those of us on the call understand how the EV charging program works, is that it actually takes demand off the grid. But there's where facts and kind of came up against just broad misunderstanding about the program. And so the misunderstanding, I think, was, you know, why are we giving away free EV chargers? But it is a deal you make with the utility. If you get an EV charger, you cannot, you don't charge during peak hours, and that keeps demand on peak hours down, keeps costs down for everyone. But it was not you know, the debate of the facts did not win there. So the EV charging program has been moved to bonding. So bonding will pay for it. It's a smaller program now. And the way the legislation is written is that it's limited to lower income and environmental justice communities. I'd have to look specifically at the start date of that, but I think there's an opportunity to learn and see what happens and come back at it and see if there's any changes that can be made. But yep, you are reading the legislation and hearing correct things. And in fact, I'm going to drop in the chat for you the kind of plain language summary of SB4 from the Office of Legislative Research. I always find those helpful. But how it plays out is the next thing we have to watch.
Steve already did that.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
Awesome.
So I just very quickly at this 3.5 cent charge, I still don't quite understand that. For my net metering now, on a day-to-day basis, I sell to the utility at the retail rate, and I buy back in the evening at the retail rate. With this 3.5 cent charge, does that mean that I will be selling at the standard rate minus 3.5 cents? Is that what they're talking about?
There may be the knowledge in the room here, if folks know, if you want to drop it in the chat. But I don't know an answer to that question just yet, Peter.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much. George, I think you had your hand up. And you're also muted. There you go.
The 25 million that's set aside for heat pumps, I think it's great. I would like to see more. How are those funds going to be distributed? And in what areas, or is there any areas in particular?
So right now it allows bonding for that, and it would be based on a program that is set up by DEEP. And I know DEEP last week had a climate planning meeting, and so they're really thinking about things that we have brought up about heat pumps, that you know, electric resistance, particularly heat pump hot water heaters, and electric resistance space heating are expensive and inefficient, and you know, where we targeting heat pumps to those particular applications makes a lot of sense. So we don't know yet how they'll spend it, but they're kind of projecting that that might be the way they go. And so I think, you know, one thing we want to do out of these legislative studies that come out is make sure we're following through on implementation.
Okay.
Thank you. Tracy, and then we're gonna end there, and I have one last thing to say after you're done with your question.
Hi, yeah, I'll be quick. I just wanted to thank you, Juliana and Samantha, for all your work, and everyone else on the call. Thank you for the work that you are doing, because it takes a lot of it just takes a lot of us, I think. I did want to add, I was in on it was a Yale program, just an hour long, that discussed, and there were 4 experts, but they just went over myths and disinformation regarding climate change that I thought was really interesting, and it might kind of weave into our narrative here. So I'll see if I can share that with you.
Yeah, please, if you can put it in the chat or email it to me, and I'll send it to everyone after when I send
Yes.
the video out. Okay, perfect. All right, so we have about 3 minutes left. Thank you, everyone here. Oh, Sam, you have your hand up. And then
Oh,
I'll go.
just before you go, I want to give a big shout out to our legislative chair, Steve Lewis, who's been quiet today, but is like, you know, convenes our weekly meetings, and every Sierra Club member is invited to be a part of that. It's really a helpful group. So let us know if you'd like to join that. And also, you know, he spent many years at the legislature, so he knows the workings and is a great strategist when we're up against, you know, any circumstance basically that happens at the legislature. So big thank you to Steve.
Do you want to put your email in the chat if you can? If not, I definitely can. If people want to get involved in the legislative committee, you can reach out to Steve directly. Like I said, we meet weekly. There's a lot of people on that committee here today, and they can probably attest to everything that we said today. So we have 2 minutes left, and we did a lot of talking and a lot of going over really, really heavy bills. And so next week, we're going to do a post-legislative session celebration, and this is for everybody to come, whether you're watching from afar and just learning about legislation or being deeply involved in our partnering organization. Everyone is welcome. I put the registration link in the chat. I'll put it in there one more time before we go, and there's also a QR code. There's also a QR code on the screen if you want to scan it, and then you can sign up there. We'll be at Hammonasset State Park next Thursday at 5 p.m. So I just want to thank everyone again. I'm going to stop recording.